from DMC. I'm happy that you were able to join us today. I'm excited to be offering a unique class for you today. We are very happy to be involved with the Michaels Upcycling Campaign. And what we're going to demonstrate today is we're going to take some ordinary denim or any type of apparel or accessories, and by using DMC flosses and some embroidery techniques, transfer paper, you will upcycle an ordinary garment into an extraordinary one. So I'm going to let Melissa take over from here. And let's get into the class. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat. Sit back and enjoy, or we hope that you participate and stay active on the chat. So Melissa, why don't you start?
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Galbraith, and I'm the fiber artist behind M Creative J. I specialize in nature-inspired embroidery kits and patterns. And I also have a book out that's called How to Embroider with Texture and Pattern. Today we are going to be embroidering our denim. So I'm going to quickly go over all of our different materials, and then we'll dive into our project. So if we could switch over to overhead view, perfect. All right, so first you will want your denim that we're going to embroider. For this class, we'll be embroidering the pocket, but you can really embroider anywhere you want on your denim. We will also be using a few colors of DMC embroidery thread. I picked out a green for the stem, a different green for some leaves, and then two colors that we'll be mixing together for our flowers. You can use any colors you would like for your project. If you want these specific ones, they are in the class link. We'll also be using some transfer paper to transfer our pattern onto our denim. I printed out the pattern we'll be using, and then that way we'll be using it to trace it onto our fabric. And then we'll also be using a DMC embroidery needle and some scissors today. So to get started, we will want to pull out some of the yellow paper from our transfer paper pack here. And then I like to stick something like sturdy inside or underneath my fabric. I just grabbed a little box I had. And then we'll take our transfer paper and flip it with the colored side down. We'll take our pattern that we want right on top there and kind of align it up where we want this to go. And then I have just a pen here that I'm going to trace over my pattern with. We want to press nice and hard to get this pattern on here. So kind of just press down really hard here so this pattern transfers onto our fabric. In your transfer paper pack, there's also blue and yellow transfer paper. I chose to use the yellow because it'll hopefully be a little easier to see on our blue denim. We just want to press nice and hard on here to get this to transfer. Yeah. Further, get the rest of our stem. Flowers here. All right, let's see how we did. Oh, there we go. You can see our pattern right here. Nice and yellow. I guess it's a little hard to see on camera. Let me hold it up a little closer so you can see there. You can see it transferred. I can see it pretty well. I know it looks a little blurry on the camera here, but we have our stem lines and our little flowers here that we are going to get started with. All right, now for our pattern, I am going to start with our stem lines here. And the reason we're starting with those is because we want to be able to work off of them. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a little bit here. But for that one, I used DMC 370. And when we split apart our thread, we'll pinch the end that has the barcode here, find the thread that's coming out, and we're going to measure out an arm's length. So I like to go nose to fingertips. So measure out an arm's length there. And then we'll cut that away from the skein. The reason I do an arm's length is because you know you have enough to work with your own arm, and you're not necessarily going to leave thread in the back of your project and have it tangle up. Inside that thread we just cut, you'll notice there's actually 6 strands of thread here. I don't usually work with all 6 because it's pretty bulky and chunky, and some materials just don't hold up to all 6 strands as well. So for our denim, we're going to use 3 strands of thread. And when we do that, we'll pinch the very end, grab just 1 strand at a time. We want to pull straight up so that thread bunches underneath our fingertips there. We'll set that 1 strand down, flatten out our thread, and then go in for another strand. Pinch and pull out another. There we go. And the reason I grab 1 strand at a time is because when I grab more than 1 strand, it usually becomes a big tangly mess. And I try to avoid that. So these 3 strands I have left, I will just set on the side here and take my other 3 strands and we'll put them back together so they're nice and even at the end here. You want to line them up as best you can so that way it's easier to thread your needle. If they're a little fuzzy or you can't quite line them up all the way, you can always just cut the end so you have a nice crisp edge there. And then before we thread our needle, I like to get my thread a little wet so it sticks together, which means I'm going to stick it in my mouth. So there we go. Now it's all nicely stuck together here. And then we'll grab one of our embroidery needles. And we'll hold our thread as close as we can to the end of our fingertips and gently glide that through the eye here, like so. Now, when I thread my needle, I like to have a short side of thread and a long side of thread. And I'll put a knot at the end of the long end of thread here. But the reason I always have a short side is so that I can easily take my needle off the thread, undo any stitches or knots and things like that. So to make our knot, I like to do a quilter's knot at the end of my thread here. When I do that, I hold the needle pointy side up, and the short side of thread is closest to my palm here. Then I take the end, the very end of the long end of thread, and I cross that in front of my needle. So I make a little plus sign. Where those 2 cross, I'm going to pinch together between my thumb and finger that is holding the needle. And I'm going to keep everything in my dominant hand. In my other hand, I have a loop of thread. We'll take the top part of that loop and we'll wrap it around our needle 3 times. Make sure that's nice and tightly wrapped. And then I'll pinch together between my thumb and finger that's holding the needle here. I'll let go of my loop in the other hand and I'll keep pinching everything because it's going to turn into my knot. And then we'll gently pull up and wrap our fingers around the thread so we don't unthread our needle, and keep pulling till we get our knot, the end of our thread. And I'll do that again just so if you're following along, you can do it again with me, but we only need 1 knot. So for our quilter's knot, we have our short side of thread, long end of thread. We'll hold our needle pointy side up in our dominant hand. We'll take the very end of our long end of thread and we cross that in front of our needle so we make a little plus sign. Where those 2 cross, we'll pinch together between our thumb and finger that's holding our needle. And then in our other hand, we have a loop of thread. We'll take the top part of that loop and we'll wrap it around our needle 3 times. Make sure that's wrapped nice and tight and then pinch together between our thumb and finger that's holding our needle. We'll let go of our loop in the other hand. And then we'll keep pinching that wrap as we pull our needle straight up, wrap our fingers around our thread, and then keep pulling so we get to the end of our long end of thread. And that's how we get our knot. You might have a little bit of thread after your knot, and that's because wherever you cross your thread in front of your needle is where your knot's going to be. So if you have some extra, we'll just cut that away. And the reason we don't leave all that thread hanging out afterwards is because we don't want it tangled up on the back of our project or pulled through to the front and having some funky little thread bits there. All right, so we have our knot. Now we're going to start on our stem lines. And the beauty of this project is that all of the stitches are using the split back stitch. So when we do the split back stitch, we are leaving a space and then going backwards to fill in that space, hence the name back stitch. And we're also going to be splitting our thread apart. So I know that sounds kind of weird, but I'll show you what I mean. So when we first get started, we want to start at the very bottom of our stem line here. And I'm going to work my way up that center line, and then I'll do the branches that come off of it. So when we get started, we'll bring our needle into our pocket, and I'm going to rotate my piece just to make it a little easier to access this pocket here. But we want to come up right at the very bottom of our stem there, right, like so. Or, sorry, not at the very bottom, a little ways away from the bottom, about 1/4 of an inch away from the bottom there. So there's the bottom, and I'm coming up about 1/4 of an inch away. So we're coming up here. And we want to tug so we feel that knot nice and flush with the back of the fabric. And then we're going backwards to the end of that line there, hence the name back stitch. So we're going to tug our thread so it's nice and flush with our fabric. And now we're going to leave another space along our stem line here. So we'll come up, leaving about 1/4 of an inch of space. Pull our needle through again. And now to connect our next back stitch, we're going to bring our needle down in the middle of that stitch we just made, hence splitting it. So split back stitch. Bring your needle back down in the middle of that back stitch there, like so. And we'll keep working our way up our stem line here. So come up, leaving a space, and then we bring our needle back down in the middle of that last stitch, just like so. And I generally aim for about 1/4 of an inch on my split back stitches. You could go a little shorter if you wanted. I just don't recommend going longer because when you do clothing embroidery, you don't want really long stitches that are going to pop away from the fabric. We want them nice and short. Come on up here. Leave another space. And come back down. Now that I finished this first short little stem line here, I need to get over to my center stem line. And we don't want to just jump over to that stem line. We want to make sure we work along the back till we get to where we want to start again. So I'm going to kind of flip my pocket inside out here. And I will run my needle underneath my stitches I've already done. So just slide my needle underneath and find the next section and slide it on under. And I'll do this till I get back down to the bottom of my stem where I want to start again. And the reason we do that is because we're protecting the thread on the back and also making so we don't have really long jumps of thread back there. You could knot and start again, but I find it's a little easier to do it this way. All right, so I'm back down at the bottom. So we're going to do that split back stitch up the center again. So we will leave our space, come on up, and then go back down the end of our stem line there.
Melissa,
Space.
question for you. Based on the chat, I know that you have this design that you created, and someone's asking, you know, they could, where did you get your inspiration? Because it wasn't included in the download. You know, you could create your own. This was just a source of inspiration, but how did you just came up with it on your own? Was it something that was you had a lot of experience with based on some of your other embroideries?
Oh, well, I'm sorry that wasn't included in the download. I pull a lot of inspiration from nature, and I will say that a lot of it comes from taking my dogs out on walks. We have lots of plants and really beautiful gardens in our neighborhood. I will admit my garden is a lot more dandelions than actual plants. But I love seeing what our neighbors plant, what kind of like pops up in the neighborhood, and just really pulling inspiration from that. So I'll take reference photos just kind of to get an idea of colors or like leaf shapes or flowers and things like that. And then I will come back and kind of use those photos that I take to draw out patterns. And I am personally one of those people who loves to use a pencil and paper when I draw. However, some people love to use like an iPad, Procreate, or just jump into like some digital drawing, maybe with Adobe or different things like that too.
Sounds good. One other thing is once you finish the stitches, you might want to pull your denim closer to the camera because it is a little, there you go. Because of the green color, the contrast is a little bit challenging for the viewers to see. So occasionally just pull it a little closer.
Yeah, there we go. We're still working our way up this stem line here. I'm working on that center stem. And if you have really curvy lines, it is helpful to make your stitches a little shorter, just so they hug those curves a little more. And you don't have some weird choppy lines here. And the nice thing about embroidering on denim, it has a little more structure and stability. If you choose to embroider on other types of clothing, the material can be a little stretchier. So you just want to be careful that you're not stretching out your fabric. And if you did something that's a little stretchier, you might want to use an embroidery hoop as well. But this denim is pretty thick and has a lot of good structure with it, so you don't necessarily need an embroidery hoop to embroider with.
Melissa, another question. What size of the embroidery needle are you using for stitching this denim? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I grabbed the number 1 out of this pack. I think when you embroider, it's really important to find a needle that you like and enjoy. I personally prefer a slightly longer needle to make it easier to hold and grab. However, some people like shorter or thinner needles. The important thing about picking out a needle is you just want to make sure that you're not going to damage the fabric when you stitch. So you can just do a little test on the corner of your fabric where you bring your needle in and out, kind of like this, and just make sure that you're not having any holes or kind of like damage happening to the fabric when your needle is going in and out of it. If you're kind of unsure about what needle you might like, DMC makes some great starter packs, so you could kind of grab a variety pack there and test them out and see which ones you prefer. Yeah. All right, so we're at the end of this stem line, so I'm going to work my way down to another one here. So again, open up the back here and just kind of run my needle underneath some of those stitches. And because we're not going all the way down, I kind of have to flip back over and see where does the stem line attach. So I try to kind of like hold my finger there and press up to see where it is. I think we're about there. So maybe go under another stitch or two.
One of the other questions, Melissa, and I believe I know the answer on this one already, is about using stabilizer on the back of the fabric.
Yeah.
I mean, is that something we're using the transfer paper, obviously, to apply the pattern? And as we mentioned, for those of you who may be joining us later, this is like a freehand style pattern that she created. So it's very simple, and she traced it onto the transfer paper, and then that's what created the yellow stencil on the front. But as far as stabilizing the stabilizer on the back of it, what do you recommend?
Yeah,
Is
so
that necessary for denim?
I wouldn't say it's totally necessary for denim. Denim is usually pretty thick and sturdy on its own. You can put on a stabilizer if the embroidery is kind of going to rub against your skin and you might have more sensitive skin. That might be a good option. And there are quite a few like iron-on options that you can get. There's one that kind of, I think it's like Sulky Tender Touch has like a really good option that you can iron on, and then it has like a smooth finish on the other side for that. But I personally, for my denim, don't use a stabilizer just because I find that if you keep your stitches nice and close to the fabric and make sure you run your needle underneath your stitches on the back, then you don't necessarily have an issue of needing to like cover up the back or add kind of stabilizer back there. If it doesn't feel messy back there, then having a stabilizer would be good to kind of contain that.
One of the other questions, and I put it in the chat already, is that we are, to get this desired effect, we are obviously using DMC product, and this floss is a 6-strand floss, so it does hold up to this particular technique and to get the desired effect for this design. So there are people who are asking what other threads and things. This is what we're recommending to get the desired results, the DMC 6-stranded floss.
Yes. Yeah. I love using DMC for clothing embroidery because it's also color fast. So you're not going to have to worry about that color bleeding when you wash your embroidery later. I do know that some other colors and brands aren't like that. And so it's really sad when you get your embroidery finished and then you have the colors bleed all over the place. So with DMC, you don't have to worry about that, which is nice. Work on our other stem line here. And as you can see, I'm kind of getting down to the end of my thread. Let's see if we can finish up this stem line here. And then I'll show us how to knot our thread on the back. Make sure we're splitting our stitch. All right, so pull our thread all the way to the back here. So when we knot our thread off on the back, we first need to make a knot, and I like to do what's called a slip knot. So I have my thread coming out of the back of the fabric, and I'm going to cross it over itself. So we make a loop, and then I'll just bring my needle through that loop, and where everything crosses, that's my knot. So I need to get it flush with the fabric. If I tug right now, my knot's going to be pretty high up from the fabric here. So I want to kind of just hold that loop and kind of work it on down so it's nice and flush. And once it is, you can see it's touching the fabric there. Then I'll hold it in place with my finger and tug my other hand so that knot is now flush with the fabric. And again, we want to add a little extra protection to that knot. So kind of how we worked along the back on our stem here, we're just going to run our needle underneath a few extra stitches there to tuck that in. So I'll do that one more time just so we can see it, but you only need to do it once. So we have our thread coming out of the back, and we're going to start with a slip knot. So cross our thread over itself so it makes a loop. Bring our needle through that loop, and where everything crosses, that's our knot. We'll work that on down nice and flush towards the back there. And once it's touching our fabric, just hold that in place and then tug so our loop becomes a knot right there. And then we want to just add a little extra protection. So we'll run our needle underneath a few nearby stitches, like so. And then I can cut that thread away. So I'm going to set my needle. I'm just actually going to put it in my denim right here so I don't lose it. And we'll just cut this nice and flush my other stitches there. Because we're still working on our stem lines, I will grab the other 3 strands of that green I had here, and we'll rethread our needle. So again, we want to make sure our ends are nicely lined up. I'm going to flatten out our thread after we've done so, and then I'm going to get it wet, so I'll stick the thread in my mouth. Make sure they're all nicely stuck together, and then hold your thread as close as you can to the end of your fingertips there. If you have more thread in front, it's going to wiggle and come apart and make it harder to thread your needle. So hold it as close as you can to the end. And then we'll just gently use our fingertips to glide it through the eye of our needle, like so. And I'm going to make another quilter's knot. So let me put that down for a sec. So for our quilter's knot, again, we have our short side of thread and our longer side of thread. We hold our needle pointy side up in our dominant hand, and we take the very end of our long end of thread. We cross that in front of our needle to make a little plus sign, and where those 2 cross, we want to pinch together between our thumb and finger that's holding the needle. In our other hand, we have a loop of thread. We'll take the top part of our loop and wrap that around our needle 3 times. Pinch that together between our thumb and finger. We let go of our loop, and then we keep pinching that wrap as we pull our needle up, wrapping our fingers around our thread till we get to the end of our long end of thread. And then we'll just cut away that little extra bit there. So we now have our stem lines on this side here. So I'm just going to start up at the top of this one here. We'll come on up, leaving a little space from where I want that stem to start, and then just go back down. Another thing you can do with your split back stitch is instead of pulling your thread all the way through, we can also just pop our needle up through the fabric. So you can see I've gone back and I'm coming up a little ways. So I pull through, and that would give us our first stitch and then the space we need there. And then we go back down into that stitch we've done, and then pop our needle back up the length of our next stitch and come on up. And that is another way to do the split stitch there. You don't have to keep pulling your needle in and out of the fabric, but you do have to position it a little easier when you slide your needle up through. So sometimes that can be a little tricky. Put it in, come back up a little ways here, and work our way down to where this stem attaches to my other stem here. Come back up. We want to just come right next to this stem here, like so. Down. You want to make, oh, looks like I caught a little bit of that stem in my stitch. So we'll do another one just to make sure we don't have some weird stem bits here. There we go. Pull that nice and flush. And there's that other stem. We have one more little guy right there, so we'll work our way down. So open up that back. Put it underneath a few stitches here. Mark on our last little stem line. And if you want to slide it through and pop it back up, go with that. Just make it a little easier with our split back stitch. Right, so I think these are all of our stem lines here. So we'll knot our thread off. So come to the back. We want to make our slip knot first. So cross our thread over itself so we have a loop. Bring our needle through that loop. And where everything crosses, that's our knot. We'll get that nice and flush with the back of the fabric. Hold it in place and then gently tug so our knot is nice and flush there. And then we want to tuck that little tail of our thread. So we'll slide our needle under a few nearby stitches. And then we can cut that thread away. Cut that nice and flush with our fabric. All right. Now we are going to add some of our flowers here. So let me flip this around so you can see this a little easier first. So these flowers here are two colors mixed together. And when you do that, we're just going to grab a couple strands of one color and a couple strands of another color, and it's a fun way to make your own variegated thread. DMC does have a lot of really fun variegated thread options, but if you have two colors you really love, you can also just make your own. So when we do that, we'll measure it out just like we did last time. So barcode at the top, find our thread end, measure out our arm's length. We'll cut that away here. And then we want to do the same with the other thread. So I find it's helpful to make sure that we measure out the same length here. So I'll kind of put those two ends together and then pull out the same length there. And these two colors I'm using are DMC 223 and DMC 315. You are following along with these colors. So now we need to pull our thread apart. So I'm gonna grab these colors one at a time here. So my darker color first, just pinch the very end, grab one strand and pull straight up. That thread bunches underneath our fingertips. We'll set that down next to us here. And then I'll also grab one strand of my other color here. So pinch the very end, grab just one strand. Oh, that's two. Just one. And again, pull straight up so that thread bunches underneath my fingertips. All right. I'll put my 5 strands of both of those colors over, and we'll take these 2 we have here, line them up at the end so they're nice and even. Then we want to thread our needle again. That end wet, hold it as close as we can to the end of our fingertips, and head on through. And just like we did with our stem lines, we need to put a knot at the end of our thread. So our quilter's knot, hold our needle pointy side up, take the very end of our long end of thread, cross that in front of our needle, pinch those 2 together, and then we have the top part of our loop here. So we're going to wrap around our needle 3 times, pinch that wrap together, let go of our loop, and then we keep pinching as we pull straight up and wrap our fingers around our thread. And we pull till the end of our long end here. Cut away that extra thread. All right, now we're going to add our little blooms here. So these are also using the split back stitch. For this one, flipping my piece around again to have it a little easier to get to the pocket. But we're just going to start kind of on the partway into one of our flowers here. Come on up. When we go back down where that petal will connect with the stem. And then come up at the end of our petal there. And go back.
Melissa, I
Yeah.
just want to interject. We're a little past halfway, so just want to know some people that are stitching along. You're moving at a nice pace. There's a couple of questions that I just wanted to present to you regarding. We have different levels of stitchers, and thank you all for joining. Regarding how you have the 2 ends, one is intentionally after you connected these 2 and you twisted them together. Can you just show the needle part, because one is shorter, one side of the thread is
Yes.
loose. Yeah, can you explain that to one of the, because she's a novice and she was just a little confused by what was the intention of that?
Yeah, so the reason I always have a loose, shorter end is because if you tied the 2 ends together, you would be doubling your thread. So my 2 strands would become 4, and it would be thicker, which I don't want. And also, the reason you have a loose end is so that way, if I need to undo any stitches or take out a knot or something, I can easily take my needle off the thread there. If you were to tie your ends together, your needle is on your thread and it's very hard to get it undone or to take anything out as well too.
Sounds great. Thank you for that. And I hate to say this, but I have to jump in on this one. We see that when you turned your denim over, you have another embroidery design that you created on the, I guess the back.
I do.
Yeah, the other yoke, which is great. Look, and you embellished it, that there's so many different, she's here to inspire you. I did put in the chat that Melissa is a DMC loyalist, and we're glad to have her participate in this class and offer some inspirations and some great tips and techniques. But I also put in the chat that she has an Instagram that you could follow at mcreativej, and she also has a website, so you could follow her there and get lots more inspiration. We're glad that she's a DMC loyalist, and this has come together nicely. So keep asking questions. There are no dumb questions, as the one participant asked. So everybody's learning from this, so it's all good. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, actually, there's so much you can do with clothing embroidery. I'll pause right here for a moment and show you the other side of these pants. So these ones actually had some holes on the front here that I patched and then embroidered over. So you can do all sorts of fun things with embroidery to mend your garments. These ones have a lot of fun, like ferns and different things on here. Also the sweatshirt I'm wearing has some like embroidery up near the neck here. And then behind me, you can see also some other fun embroidered pieces there as well too. So there's so many different things you can embroider, and I love using embroidery to really make your clothing your own. So we'll finish up this little flower here. Just working on adding my petals in.
It's great that you're doing this upcycling. And I just mentioned too, you're right on point with your designs, a lot of inspirations from nature, you know, from this visible mending. That's a really big trend. So we're really happy that you're able to demonstrate all these different techniques.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I will say I hate clothing shopping, and so it's really fun to just like repair and make your clothing your own. I am also one of those people who, when I find something I like, I will buy it in almost every color that I like that they have. And so this way it helps kind of not make it look like you have a bajillion things of the same kind.
Yeah, well, you made them, they're your designer originals, which is a good thing because this is really the trend now. It's just to be, you know, make more with less and to be more, you know, frugal and be more prudent about our purchases. And this is just such a great way to update your wardrobe. And you could do these things not only on apparel, but on accessories, totes, and little quilting for little pouches. I know it's a big deal for doing home goods, blankets, towels, linens, things like that. So there's so many opportunities.
There are. I actually have a book coming out in December about embroidering your own shoes that has a bunch of really fun designs.
That is very cool. Yeah, that's what I said. I mentioned that you have some really interesting designs on both your website and on your Instagram. So please follow. And like anything else, when you do make anything, we would love to see what you're doing. And Michael's would love to see it as well. So you can just, if you do a hashtag, include it in Make It With Michael's. Sometimes they do make the selections of certain people's, certain stitchers, crafters, creative projects, and they'll post them on their UGC gallery. So it's a great way to explore and share your creativity with everyone out there.
So real quickly, I finished this flower over here, and I want to work my way along the back to get over to another section right here. So when I do that, just like when we moved along our stem line here, I just wrapped my stitches along the back, going down one stem line and up another one here to get to where I want to go. And we'll come on up like so, and go back down to start our next stitch. Now, someone had asked, how do we undo a stitch? So let me finish making this stitch real quick, and then I'll show you. So say I put the stitch here and then decided I didn't want it. So I would unthread my needle, and then I like to use the eye of the needle because it's duller, and I'll just gently slide that underneath my stitch there and pull it on out like so. The reason I don't like to use the pointy part is because it can sometimes dig into your fabric and can also split apart your threads. So you might only get like one or two threads there. So use the eye of the needle and just gently slide it underneath your stitch there. And you can do the same on the back. Just find your thread and slide your needle underneath and tug there. And then because we have our loose end, we can just rethread our needle and keep on going. I'm adding our next flower here. Thanks.
I think we're getting quite a few questions about your pattern. So what we'll do is when we upload the video to the YouTube channel on Michael's, which will happen in the next 24 hours, we will add an attachment of the design so that you could download it or copy it for yourself, because we're getting a lot of requests for it. So this is Melissa's own creative design. You can make your own, but we recognize that some people, as myself, like things that are very particular and follow along step by step. So we understand, and we will make that available to you once the video posts.
Yes, sometimes it's easier to follow along on a design than trying to figure out what you want to do or freehand it. I personally love thinking of embroidery as like coloring with thread, and know that if I were to just be given a blank piece of fabric and some thread, sometimes it's hard to visualize exactly what you want and how you want that to look. Right. So moving on to our next flower over here. And I'm actually going to use some of my seam that's part of the pants here, so I can just work my way along that stitch that's already in there. Jump over to my next stem here, and then keep working along the back till I get up to where I want my next flower to start. As you can see, you can't see any of that on the front, it's all on the back there. And we'll just start our next flower petal here. And again, we're still using the split back stitch. And there are lots of different embroidery stitches you can use. I like the split back stitch, especially for clothing embroidery, because your stitches are nice and close to the fabric. So you don't have to worry about anything getting snagged or caught, or some weird funky things happening when you wear or wash your embroidery here. All of my flower petals here have 5 petals. Flowers have 5 petals with them, so I just think it makes them nice and full, but you could add more or less if you wanted there. Go. Now we want to move over to our next stem line. So again, we don't just want to jump over here, so we're going to work along the back. And you could also knot your thread using that slip knot and then start again if you want. I just find that sometimes working along the back feels a little faster. So you don't have to keep knotting and cutting and starting again. But it is totally up to you if you would like to just knot your thread, cut it, and then start again on a different spot. Somebody had asked, do I use an embroidery hoop when working with lighter weight fabric? So yes, if I were using a stretchier material, such as like t-shirt material or something that's thinner, an embroidery hoop is very helpful to keep that garment from like stretching out or adding some structure when I stitch. The reason I'm not using an embroidery hoop right now is because my denim is pretty thick and has some good structure. This pocket would also just be really hard to get inside an embroidery hoop, and getting anything over like thicker seam lines and things like that can distort the tension in your embroidery hoop and make it not as useful. But if you were doing like a t-shirt or a sweater or something like that, an embroidery hoop can be very helpful. You just want to make sure you're not distorting the fabric when you put it in your embroidery hoop. So you want to make sure you don't overly stretch it. And you can tell when you look at your fabric if it kind of has some weird wiggles or warp lines, that would let you know that your fabric is too stretched out in that hoop.
Okay, I'm going to just jump in again because we have a few things. People are asking about the patterns and inspirations. So like I included, if you're very inspired by Melissa's creativities here today, she can be reached and followed on Instagram at mcreativej. Is that right, Melissa? I think I did it right. And also on her website, mcreativej.com. And she has a plethora of great ideas, tutorials, all kinds of helpful hints. So I encourage you to do that. But also Michael's, we're thankful that they were allowing us on this platform to host this class. And we'll hopefully with some good responses, we'll have more that you can go onto the Michael's class site and you could search by category, by craft. So one of the participants asked, yes, you can go in there and look at needlecraft, and they have a directory of or a repository of many different types of arts and crafts. So that should be helpful. And if you just go to the Michael's website, they're pretty well organized. And then you can go to their YouTube channel and do the search, the same search as well. And as always, we always say we want to see everyone's creations. I'm sure people would love to, for you to tag, and get in contact with Melissa. She's got like I said, a great following. But if you do a hashtag make it with Michaels, I think that we could see how much you enjoy needle crafting. So we're always looking to broaden our reach and get more people involved, and particularly go to Michaels and shop for the DMC products. Thank you for your support as always. Melissa, you're moving along quickly. You're doing well.
We are almost finishing up this flower here, and then we'll have one more to go, and then we can add in our little leaves.
There's another interesting question. So when you're done with this stitch, if you wouldn't mind to bring the garment into closer view so we can get a little more detail. But someone's asking if you layer colors. And is there anything special to know about that?
Yeah, so here is this a little closer. You can see here, working our way along with our flowers here. Here's a closer up on this one. I also have this and some white here that might make it a little easier to see as well. This one was a sample I stitched just in the hoop, so you could see it better on the white cap.
Nice.
Yeah, I know on the denim sometimes it can be hard
Yeah,
to
yeah,
see.
it looks good.
Layering colors. Do you mean blending thread together or stitching on top of other stitches? Because you can do both. So with, let me put this down here, let me see. So over here, I do have some stitches on top of other stitches. You can see I put some French knots on top of my mushroom here to add those little dots in. Same with these little seed stitches to add stitches to my mushroom caps. So you can stitch on top of other stitches. Same with down here, these grass blades. I did like one color and then I stitched in some other ones on top of those there too, so they overlap. You can definitely do that to layer your thread in there. This section right here, where you can see the multi-colors in the mushroom, the top of the mushroom stem here, that is two colors blended together. So kind of similar how we're doing the flowers, you can blend it together there, and that gives you that more variegated look as well too. So there, you can definitely do both options, stitching on top of other stitches or kind of blending your thread colors together to stitch in there or doing other stitches on top of ones. When you stitch on top of other stitches, you just want to make sure you're not spreading apart those stitches. So making sure your stitches that that's the like base layer is all tightly packed and close there. And then those stitches on top lay flush on top of those other ones and aren't kind of splitting apart your thread to expose the fabric underneath. But layering is a fun way to add extra depth to your project and more additions to the design. So you can really kind of think of it as coloring. You're just adding different layers and different effects to your project there. All right, so let's work over to our last flower. And I think we might need to knot this thread off. I don't think it's going to make it all the way. So we'll do our slip knot, thread coming out of the back, cross it over itself, bring our needle through that loop, bring that cross part nice and flush with my fabric, hold it in place, and tug, and then we'll just gently go underneath a few of our nearby stitches there. And then we'll cut this away. And the reason I always like to put my needle in my fabric that I'm stitching on is because if I set it down on the table, I sometimes lose it. And then a rogue needle is never a good thing.
Melissa, one thing that kind of resonated with a lot of people on this in attending the class is that when you showed the hoop design, which was on a beige background, it was much more vivid. So you're free to do this obviously on all different types of garments, but there were those two images that were presented when you enrolled in the class. So we did have the denim version as well as the hoop embroidery so that you could have see specifically what the design was going to look like. But once again, we'll put a PDF attached to the video so that you could mimic the design. All right, so we're closing in on the last cluster of the flowers.
Yes, we are. We have one more flower to go, so I'm just trimming off that extra thread after the knot here. And get our last flower added in. Mhm. And even though these flowers are very short, we still don't want to do one long stitch for each flower petal, just because if that one stitch snagged or got caught on anything, it would kind of become a weird loop on the front or could potentially tear your thread. So I'm doing 2 short stitches for each of my flower petals here to make them nice and flush with the fabric. One more little petal here. And we'll knot our thread up on the back and add in our leaves. So another slip knot back here.
Melissa, some of the people our participants have been stitching along. So that's really encouraging that you have that type of skill that you could keep up with Melissa, and glad to see that. This has been very relaxing to watch as I'm moderating here. And yeah, now I'm kind of inspired to get some of this, give it a go.
All right, so for our leaves here, we're going to use our other green color. So put my needle here. For these petals, I'm using 471. So it's a slightly different green than our stem lines here, but we'll hold it with the barcode at the top, find our thread end, and measure out our arm's length. Cut that away. And then just like last time, we are going to split our thread apart one at a time. So pinch the very end, one strand, and pull up. And for these petals, I used 3 strands of thread. So pinch and pull. One more here. Make sure we only grab one strand. If you get more than one, you can also tangle up some. Line up our thread ends here. thread our needle and put a knot at the end real quick with our quilter's knot. And I like the quilter's knot just because when my mom taught me to make a knot, it was originally like you tied your thread end together and then you tried to make another knot on top of that. And usually you ended up with like a row of knots that turned into one big glob at the end. But the quilter's knot kind of gives you one solid knot all in one go, which is nice. But if you have a different type of knot you like to use, any knot will work. You just want to make sure the thread is nicely secured at the end there. So to add our leaves, I'm going to do this split back stitch again. So come up kind of a little ways away from our stem line there. Back down to connect our leaf. Just like our petals, these use 2 little split back stitches for each petal of our leaf. Each portion of our leaf there. There's one little leaf. Put another one right next to it here. Connect that back from the stem line. Space and go back. And we'll work our way along the back to get over to our other stem to add some more leaves over there. And the nice thing about pockets are kind of easy to flip open. There are some other portions of clothing that are much harder to get to. I am currently covering up a stain on the front like pouch pocket of a sweater, and it is much harder to get at. More little leaves here. And really, if you're not stitching along, or even if you are, when you get to your pattern, I really encourage you to make it your own. Maybe you want more leaves or more flowers, or to use different colors, go for it. That's the fun thing about embroidery. Even though we're all using the same stitches and stitching something very similar, you can really make it your own and have it be uniquely handmade. That is really the beauty of hand embroidery. So I know we are getting pretty close to time here, and I still have a few more leaves to go. I'm going to pause for a moment real quick. Just finish up this leaf here. So when you are all done with your embroidery, you might have a little bit of your transfer design on there. If you just get it a little wet, that should wash away nicely, and you don't have to deal with any of that transfer paper residue on there. And when I wash my clothing, I usually just throw it in the washer and dryer. I know some people are a little worried about their clothing possibly like their embroidery snagging. You can hand wash and lay flat to dry, or sometimes sticking your embroidery in a delicates bag or something like that will make it so that way you can protect your embroidery a little easier. Additionally, you could also iron a stabilizer to the back of your embroidery. I know this pocket will be kind of hard to get to, but if you were to do that, you would just cut your stabilizer slightly larger. I usually do about ½ an inch larger around your design, and then you iron it down onto the back of your embroidery there, and that can add a little extra protection to your skin, to the stitches, and if things got a little messy back there, which can sometimes happen. So here we go. Then I'll keep on adding some leaves here, and that would be how you'd finish up your flower design here. So here we go. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I had so much fun stitching with you, and I hope you learned a little more about clothing embroidery, and you have fun picking out your own DMC thread colors and supplies to stitch on your pockets as well.
Nicely done, Melissa. Thanks everyone for joining. Thank you, Melissa. Came out great. Appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.